So we have a lot of books that we would look at.
Lots of books. Lots of books.
Lots of books.
Lots of history books.
Just depending, like this is medieval, we have the Tudor's Taylor here. You know, people get really, I think people that are historians don't realize there's a difference between medieval, Elizabethan, Tudor, Renaissance. There's very different clothing in those time periods, and even within the range of the years for medieval, depending on what it is, it changes. And so we do a lot of historical research. We have, like this is Renaissance.
Classics.
We have a number of books like this that have taken figures out of paintings of the time and then just put them in and defined who they are. And these are really helpful. That's helpful. This one, I love this one because the pictures are bigger. And they tell you exactly, you know, like Italian ladies and Sienese noble women, the second half of 14th century Italy. So you can get a good idea. You know, we're looking not just at what are they wearing, what are their hats, what's the jewelry, what are the shoes like, do they wear gloves or not. You know, lots of stuff like that.
And there are a lot of books also with a lot of text to them, not just pictures that will give you information like, you know, the fabrics that were available, the colors that were available. We don't, you know, you don't want to use lace if it hasn't been invented yet. That kind of thing.
You have to be careful about purple, red.
Right,
You know,
dyes
we
that were
didn't
available
put that on
to the
somebody
wealthy.
that was a servant, you know, because it was very expensive to have that dye.
So that's the kind of research that we'd be going into, as well as looking at actual paintings. The first show that I had to do by myself, or, you know, with Joan Mary Morgan back there mentoring me, was Merchant of Venice. And that's late medieval, early Italian Renaissance. So it's Italian, it's not English. So the profiles, the silhouettes of the bodices are different than they are in England. And I looked at a lot of paintings by Carpaccio. And so from that, you know, I'm looking at the actual paintings, and then later on I actually got to, you know, go to Venice and see those actual paintings. I'm like, I did that first, I did that first. I know that, Carpaccio. But also the palette, you know, from the paintings. We looked at a palette that emerges from his paintings and ended up with a lot of red and teal and gold. That, so looking at the actual paintings is also important.
Right. This was one of my textbooks. I had to, when I was in college in Missouri, I had to graduate, I had to take a fine arts class. And I actually took costume design, just because I was a history major, and surprisingly enough, probably 50% of the class was history. You know, and because if you don't understand the history, you can't understand the clothes. And so this is very, very interesting. It goes in great detail of men wore, you know, this class of men, these are the shoe choices. This would have been leather, this would have been, you know, this cloth was first woven in this century. So lots of information in this book also.
When I mentioned the palettes, now some of the, you know, as you're doing your research, sometimes your inspiration comes from someplace else. And what I'm brought to mind was the first show that we actually designed for ourselves. You know, when we did Merry Wives of Windsor, we borrowed costumes from, well, that's actually not true. Sally Thurston designed our costumes for Midsummer Night's Dream just before the Shakespeare Guild formed. So that was designed from scratch, and it was really cool. The next year, when we did Merry Wives of Windsor, we borrowed a lot of costumes from Opera Delaware, and it was kind of a mix of whatever they had available. And then the year after that, Joan Mary over there did Much Ado About Nothing, and it was just a beautiful show. And as I remember, your inspiration for the palette you were using was a photograph, and I don't think it had anything to do with costuming. It may have been a photograph, that was taken like of an Italian sports car ad or something. And it was set in Italy. So there it was in Italy, and you had sand, and I think there was a stucco building, and the light, right? And so from the light, from the light and the sand and the stucco, you came up with this palette that had beautiful blues and pinks and kind of a peach color, and so you get your inspiration from a lot of different places. And that was mine. So it's like, here's our palette, this Fiat ad, or whatever it was, and so it was pretty cool to me.
So once we've decided sort of what we're gonna do as far as time period, we shoot sketches back and forth to each other. Then we have the casting,
Right.
and then we have to pull costumes. If we go through and see if there's anything we have already created that can be used. Now, when I started working with Cecilia 12 years ago, we didn't have very much stuff that had been made. Now, there's
a huge collection.
There's a huge collection to choose from, but every year, I can remember staying up till 1 or 2 in the morning. She would stay up all night sewing at the guild hall. But now, because of that, there is a great number of things to choose from. But we will pull what will fit for the time period and the palette that's chosen. And we have to measure every single actor. And then we decide, okay, this person needs, this many changes, because we've looked at the script and we've made notes on how many times they're going to be on stage, and is it going to be at night, is it going to be in a nightgown, 3 days later. And then we get to go fabric shopping.
Then we get to go fabric shopping, yes. We get to go fabric shopping and thrift store shopping.
Yes.
And we often, we might have a sheet like this for each actor. We have one sheet that has measurements on it, and we might have a sheet. This is, the first show you did, you actually had drawings of all these characters, and I'm like, man, there's going to be no time for this when I do it. So when I took over for Merchant of Venice, a lot of times I would just click a picture that I wanted. I want a costume like this for this actor, and make some notes about it. So, it's beautiful if you're designing a show and you have drawings. Here's our measurement sheet with all the actors' measurements on there. And Joan even showed me how to measure the inseam discreetly. Which is, let's see if I can do that. So what you do, I've scared a couple of young actors. I've scared them by saying, okay, I'm measuring you for your cod piece now. They blanch, and I just go, oh my. But what you do is you give the actor the tape measure and say, here, would you please hold this up at the top of your inseam? And after you explain what the inseam is, then they'll do that for you, and then you can get the measurement. So that's how you do it discreetly.